Welcome to Grounds for Conversations. I'm Amber Noble. It's difficult to find common ground when we focus on things we disagree about. But if we take a step back, we realize that we all have things to learn. Grounds for Conversations is a podcast where we dive into a conversation about Scripture, looking at the story in its entirety. This is for the believer, the questioner, the invested, and the searching. I invite you to join the conversation. Also, at the end of this podcast, stick around for an extra shot, a conversation where we discuss everything about nothing. Welcome back to another episode of Grounds for Conversations. And again, my guest, Aimee Raggio. I'm excited, Aimee, that we get to dive into what we're talking about today. We've been talking about misunderstood women in the Bible. And the last two episodes, we've talked about one woman each. But today, we agreed to talk about a grouping of women all in the same story. So I'm excited about that. I know you have a lot of things you've been studying. I've been studying. So are you ready for this today?
I'm ready, Amber. And thank you for having me again. I'm really excited about this particular episode, mainly because my understanding of it is ever growing and ever shifting and ever changing the more that I learn. And so I'm ready to jump into this with you and maybe fill in some gaps that we may have ourselves and for some of our listeners.
Right. Yeah. So I think let's start. Everything's found in Exodus. So let's start. To me, the setting of the stage really is in Exodus chapter 1, starting in verse 8 to verse 14. And I just want to read that real quick because understanding, it's easy to look at people and assume they do things, but you're looking at them through the lens of your own life, right?
Correct.
And so this is more about, let's look at why they responded the way they did and why they would be justified in responding different.
Absolutely.
Okay? So in Exodus chapter 1, starting in verse 8, it says, "Eventually a new king came into power in Egypt and knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, 'Look at the people of Israel now. They outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't, and if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country.' So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down from crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramesses as a supply center for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in all their demands." So that sets the stage for some of the women we're going to be talking about today in the book of Exodus. Obviously, if you have been a Christian for any amount of time, when you think of the book of Exodus, who do you think of?
Moses.
Right. Dynamic, mighty man of God.
Absolutely.
And you see that it references that the king knew nothing about Joseph. So Joseph had brought the Israelites in, and now this new Pharaoh doesn't know who Joseph is and takes these people that had been part of a community and turns them into slaves. They did not come in as slaves. They were turned into slaves. So I want to look at the women in Moses' life that were a support to him, that were crucial in the story of Moses today. So why don't we let's start with his mama.
Let's start with his mama.
Okay, why don't you tell me what you got on her?
Okay, I can tell you that her name is Jochebed or Jochebed.
Yes, I've heard people say her name, Jochebed. I'm like, I don't know that I it's just weird because it's like when you say all these normal names or normal words and then you throw a word in there with like a rolled R and you're like, oh, where'd that come from? You know, so let's call her Jochebed today. Do you want to?
Let's call her Jochebed.
Okay, go ahead.
We can call her Jackie O if you want.
Okay, so what do we know about Jochebed?
We know that Jochebed was a Levite wife married to a Levite husband. And the Levites, of course, are of the tribe of Levi, of the 12 tribes of Israel that God has chosen as his people. his royal priesthood, if you will, and their role in the kingdom is going to be fleshed out later on in Exodus. But what we have is a Levite wife married to a Levite husband. And at some point in her life, Jochebed gives her husband a son.
Right.
But not just any son, and at not just any time in history. As you've just told us, these people are in a period of just unfathomable oppression.
Right, right.
And the Pharaoh is feeling a little threatened, and so he has ordered now that any infants born to the Hebrews that are male will be put to death by the midwives at birth. Only the daughters will be allowed to survive.
Well, but so Jochebed and her husband had two older siblings.
They did
two
have
older
older
kids. They had Aaron and Miriam, right?
Absolutely.
So this law being put into place was for all upcoming Hebrew boys.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And go ahead.
We're led to believe that Aaron and Miriam might have been of a significant age older than Moses.
Right.
And you'll find out why in just a little bit. So Jochebed sees that her baby is special. The Bible doesn't elaborate on why she believes her baby is special. There's some different beliefs amongst Christians as to what that might have been that we won't get into here. But in any case, she recognized the hand of God on her baby, or that her baby was special, and she wanted to spare his life. So she crafted a little boat, pitched it with tar, laid him in it amongst the reeds in the Nile River to save his life.
So let's pause there for a second, because most normal mamas look at their babies and they see something special.
Absolutely.
But for her, in the midst of the chaos that's happening, because Pharaoh has ordered this decree that all these little boys are killed, for her to go, I mean, you got to look at the big picture. She's looking at all the other women that are in the same shoes she's in this moment.
Absolutely.
She's watching and hearing, no doubt, the cries of these mamas as their babies are ripped from their hands and taken to be slaughtered, or be thrown into the river, right? And to hear, to look at this child and go, I have to do something. Mm-hmm. I cannot let this happen. And still be there alongside of these other women as they grieve. Like, this took a strong, strong woman.
This did take a strong woman. This took a smart woman.
Yes.
She hid her baby as long as she could. She knew the command.
Okay. These are not homes that are like great insulation. Like, have you ever thought about that? How do you hide a baby? Well, my baby's cried all the time. So I'm like, how do you hide a baby?
I suppose she could have led people to believe that he might have been a baby girl, because baby girls were allowed to live. But at some point, she realizes she can't hide it any longer.
Right.
I imagine there were a lot of naked babies running around during this day and time.
Right.
Who knows? But we know that these baby boys were being thrown into the river. And she knows that she wants to preserve the life of her child that she knows is special. How does she do this without making it look too obvious?
Right.
She's going to obey and throw him into the river. If he so happens to land in a little boat and float, so be it.
Have you ever thought about that these other babies that have died, he is put in that same river and is floating? And like, that river this is not like floating a river in Texas or Arkansas or any, this river's full of snakes and hippos and all kinds of things that will kill you.
Piranhas.
So, yes, it's incredibly dangerous.
Absolutely.
And knowing that river was full of deceased little baby boys, mm-hmm. There's so much significance of this Savior literally mm-hmm. being put into a place that was meant for death mm-hmm. to overcome that death.
Well, let's be clear here. In about 40 years from now, these people are going to leave Egypt.
Right.
The Bible tells us that about 600,000 men, aside from wives and children, right. 600,000 men. So let that sink in. How many people in all are involved in this, and how many babies right. might be born at this time?
Right.
There are a lot
yes.
of babies being killed. I can't imagine.
Yes.
I've never seen the Nile River. I can only hope that it's swiftly moving so that these women did not have to watch their children.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. Ooh.
It's
we
awful.
might want to edit that out. I'm sorry.
No. I think this is real. This is real conversation, right? Like, we can't just pretend that, like, when we look at these Bible stories, that there wasn't deep grief and deep emotions and deep sorrow and all of the things that come with the loss of a child, the loss of a loved one, the loss of a husband, a wife, like the different things that people dealt with in the Bible. Grief that we feel that is real, it was just as real then.
This had to have been hell on earth for them. And how this woman had the wherewithal, the focus of mind to do what she did to preserve the life of her child is beyond me.
Right. Well, and they were slaves. They had to, their babies were stripped from them and they had to go right to work.
Absolutely.
And they were not allowed to not give it their all. And so they're grieving while being, what that scripture says, brutally oppressed. They were ruthless in all their demands. They were so oppressed and yet grieving at the same time. Well, I couldn't do it.
And the level of work that they were doing.
Right.
When you think of Egypt, we think of pyramids and we think of cities of great commerce. And these places were built on the backs of the Hebrew children.
Right.
And we know these things and we see these things because they last in part today. Physically, they're still standing.
Right.
In some parts.
Right.
The fact that she could do what she did and under the conditions that she did, leave this backbreaking slave labor and go home and care for her family, her husband and her children.
Right.
It's entirely possible that her children labored alongside her.
Sure.
And most likely they did.
Right. I think let's pause on Jochebed back up. And there were 2 midwives that played a part in this. And what were their names?
I'm probably going to butcher these names.
That's okay.
Zipporah and Puah.
Yep. That's how I would say it.
I would dare say there were likely other midwives as well in a land of people this big, but these 2 stood out for a reason.
Right. And they stood out because of their devotion to God.
Absolutely.
And I think that there is a really beautiful lesson to be learned from their lives, that we are to obey the law. We are to do what's right. We are to submit to authority. We are to submit to our leaders.
Absolutely.
But not when it trumps what God's called us to. And there's a fine line there. And it's like, well, what does that look like? And I think that you see that here. So tell us a little bit about what those 2 ladies did, what they stood for. They were commanded to do what, but then how do they respond?
All right. What happened with these 2 ladies leads us to the command that would have had Jochebed throw her baby into the river.
Right.
So the midwives were commanded by Pharaoh to go to the deliveries of the Hebrew women, and if the baby were born male, they were to kill the baby instantly. The baby girls were let live. I don't know what that looks like. Thank God I've never lost a child at childbirth, but can you imagine delivery and hearing that baby cry and then instantly hearing its cry snuffed out? I can't imagine.
Right.
But these women didn't do this. We don't know if they deliberately didn't do this, or we don't know if the reason they gave Pharaoh was truly happening. But either way, they were accountable for it.
Right.
They told Pharaoh, the Hebrew women aren't like the Egyptian women. Their labors are fast and strong, and they deliver their babies quickly, and the delivery is over.
Right.
The baby is in their arms by the time we arrive.
Right. So, which led to probably the saving of a lot of innocent babies in that moment.
Undoubtedly. And this pleased God, pleased him so much so that he made examples of these women by restoring their health or their youth, their freedom,
right.
and giving them families of their own.
Right. So many of these midwives went on to be mothers of
right.
their own. Right. It's incredible. Right. Okay. So we know that. Now we're back to Jochebed. And then there's this other little person that comes into the story of Moses. And I do think that we need to say, though, with Jochebed, that when you start hearing the story of Moses in Exodus chapter 2, those first 10 verses about what you just said, mm-hmm. people say, well, that's the beginning story of Moses. I disagree. I think that's the story of Jochebed. He's an innocent baby. He's doing nothing. But there's this woman who's stepping up and doing the right thing. And even though her name is mentioned in Exodus chapter 2, we find later on that her name is Jochebed.
Correct.
And so she does all this, but there's another little girl in the picture, and that's Miriam, right? That's Moses' older sister. And as you said earlier, was probably quite a few years older. I'm guessing 11, 12. Would you think?
I would think maybe.
Okay.
She was probably anywhere from 10 maybe to 13. I would think that she's probably prepubescent because at the onset of her puberty, she likely would have been married off.
Right. So she's right there, old enough to know and to do what she's doing. So when Jochebed puts Moses in this little basket and puts him into the Nile River, she tells Miriam, watch. Now, what a scary job. It's like, can somebody else do this, Mom? I definitely don't want to do this. So she's watching as he floats down the river, right? And he floats into the palace area. Pharaoh's daughter is out bathing.
Correct.
She sees the basket and she tells her servant to go in and draw the basket out.
Who, incidentally, would have been a woman.
Right. You see all this played out. And so to climb into that part of the river to draw this, which was probably a lot of dangerous things in the area in which he was floating. But then Miriam, let's share a little bit about that. What does she do?
Okay. Miriam is watching from the bank as her baby brother.
Hiding, though. It's not, she doesn't get to just be out in plain sight. Like, we need to know that.
She likely is hiding amongst reeds and things.
Right.
However,
especially by Pharaoh's house, right?
Absolutely. However, I do believe that because of her youth, she was not a threat, because we're going to find out later on that she gets close enough to the princess to speak to her.
Right.
So she was likely hiding her motive for being along the riverbank, but maybe wasn't out of sight.
Okay.
So she sees baby brother float in the water, and she sees baby brother being drawn out of the river and taken to the princess. And this is where we see that Miriam approaches the princess, Pharaoh's daughter, and says, "Shall I get you a wet nurse from the Hebrews?"
Because there was a lot of wet nurses at this point, because all of them had just had babies and their babies were stripped from them. But don't you think that Miriam approaching her, it doesn't matter if she was on the side of the bank and the princess saw her. The princess was bathing.
Right.
For her to approach.
Courage.
Major.
Courage.
Yes. And this little girl walks up and says, I can get you some help.
Right. Courage. And she's smart. Just like her mama was smart.
Right. And so they say yes. And she runs and gets Jochebed. And so Jochebed gets to nurse Moses what historians believe 2 years, 2 to 3 years. And then he was then returned to the palace.
I'm not a historian, and so I don't know. I'm not going to state this as a fact, but it's my personal belief that she could have possibly even nursed him longer.
Right.
Because a lot of ancient cultures in that world will nurse their children until another child comes up to like 4 years old.
Right. Which I feel the same way, just looking at the story of like Hannah and Samuel.
Right.
That just, she nursed him for a while. We know that. But I think about this sometimes, and I don't know if you've thought about this. Miriam gets her mama. Her mama goes to the palace, and Jochebed gets to bring Moses home.
And she's paid.
Wouldn't that be nice, just to be paid to do your job, of you being a mom? But how the other women around whose sons were laying in the bottom of that river must have felt. How Jochebed had to work through those emotions of grieving with her friends, grieving with her family, but yet rejoicing at the same time of God's faithfulness and his mercy on Moses' life.
Well, and the wherewithal of the other women around to not give her away. Surely someone knew. At least they knew that one Hebrew had disobeyed.
Right. Especially since if they, like you said earlier, if they thought it was a little girl, because
Right.
swallowed up, and then to find out it was a boy. And I saw her with that baby last week, and that was a little girl, and now it's a boy. Like, what's going on here? I'm one of those people that I'm the what if. But I think when we begin to trust God and we dismiss the what ifs and we just say yes to the next step.
Absolutely.
That yes, the God who shuts the mouth of lions for Daniel can shut the mouth of a bunch of angry women too, right? Like, who knows? We don't know, and we don't want to make speculation of what was happening, but there has to be thoughts of there was a lot of emotion going around.
So much emotion. Yeah. And I can't help but think of Jochebed and what she was going through and what that looks like for us today. We're not commanded to throw our babies into a river. Our sons are not being slaughtered on the day of their birth. But how many times as moms have we had to go to bat for our children?
Right. Well, I would disagree in the fact that we're not asked to throw them into a river, but in the culture we live in, they're thrown to the wolves.
Absolutely, they are.
And our children, as soon as they are at that place where they're around society, they are being inundated with false teaching and heresy and demonic, occultish type beliefs that our society is just deemed as normal.
Right.
It's like, that's not normal. I mean, you can't turn on the TV and it's everything is in front of them saying, this is what you should look like. This is what you should believe. This is what should be okay. And so they're being torn apart really from a very early age. And we have to be super protective.
Absolutely.
And careful.
You are correct.
Okay. So then Pharaoh's daughter, I love this chick because she knew the decree too. She knew that all these babies had been killed. And she knew, I mean, like, come on. There's a baby, this cute little baby floating in it. She knew. She said, and in scripture it says, this is a Hebrew baby. She calls it out.
Absolutely.
But then she chooses to keep it, knowing that her father had just slain all the other Hebrew babies. She like, yeah, I'm going to keep this baby. So let's talk a little bit about that.
So Pharaoh's daughter.
She's bathing in the river.
That's right. And she sees this baby and she asks or commands her handmaiden to fetch him out of the water for her. When seeing that he's a Hebrew baby, and she's approached by Miriam to find a wet nurse. So Pharaoh's daughter makes a deal with Jochebed to nurse the baby for pay. And then at the appropriate time, Moses is brought back to Pharaoh's daughter. She adopts him formally and raises him as her own inside Pharaoh's house. Now, here's where things get interesting.
Right.
That's pretty much all we're told about Pharaoh's daughter in the book of Exodus.
Right.
And so because I'm a little bit nosy like that, I went poking around to see if there's anything else I can find out about Pharaoh's daughter. Now, we find out later on that her name is Batya or Bithia, as some call her, and that name has a special meaning. That name is translated to mean daughter of God.
Right.
And not little g God, capital G God.
Right.
Why would Pharaoh name his daughter Bithia?
I don't believe that he named her that.
He did not. Jewish tradition, and in some writings called the Midrash, which I think you're going to explain to us what that is in just a second, we're told that Pharaoh's daughter had actually converted and had denounced her father's idols, and her bathing in the river may have actually been a ritualistic cleansing.
Right.
And led her to also see what was special about this Hebrew child floating in the water.
Right.
But let's talk a little bit, because we don't want to make people's hair stand on end.
Right. And so understanding that we are sticking to scripture, but there is a lot of Jewish, because we go, well, why? What is that? So you begin to study. There is a lot of Jewish belief. Now, are we saying, thus saith the Lord, this is the gospel? Absolutely not. But it does fill in some gaps.
It does.
And so the Midrash, just to make it in layman's terms, it basically is the collection of the first 5 books of the Bible, which is the Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, and the 5 scrolls, which is Esther, Song of Songs, Ruth, Lamentations, and Ecclesiastes. And what these Jewish rabbis have done in the formation of the Midrash is they are connecting the dots.
Right.
Simply put, okay, like we could talk about the Midrash probably for hours and hours, and I still am learning so much about it.
Absolutely.
But it's they're connecting the dots of what happened in Genesis to where that links into Exodus, but then where does that link into Ruth, and how does that link into Ecclesiastes? So I do think, and I think we've said this before, but the Bible is not a book of short stories.
No, it's not.
Everything connects to each other, right? It all connects to itself. And so I think it's important that whether the Midrash is, because I know that there are people who go, well, that's not in the Bible. Well, guess what? All 10 of those books are in the Bible. And
Absolutely.
the Midrash is just the connecting of the pieces of those 10 books. So if that's something that you want to flip a table over, be my guest. But it's, to me, is super fascinating because it is part of the Bible that was given to the Jews specifically, and they're connecting the pieces. It's not a book of short stories. They're like, this is one big story, and this is how this all connects. So many Jewish scholars, let me say it that way, believe that she converted. Now, there is some discrepancy. Was that a ritualistic bath? Did she convert as she saw what God was doing with Moses and the people? Who knows? There is. It's like, well, I think it was then, or I think it was then. The reality is, it is fully believed that she converted to the Hebrew belief. And some would say that when they exited Egypt, she went with them.
You're correct. We do have a clue in the Bible that seems to back this up. We find that she's mentioned again in Chronicles, First Chronicles, I believe, as the wife of a descendant of Caleb, as in the Joshua and Caleb who staked out the promised land. Not that she is the wife of Caleb, but of a descendant of Caleb. This would indicate that she had converted to Judaism because she would not have been married to a Jewish husband had she not converted. We also understand that Caleb may or may not have been born a Jew. When the Hebrew children left Egypt, we're told in the Bible in Exodus that a mixed multitude left with them. Some believe that Caleb might have been part of that mixed multitude that had converted.
Well, let's think about slavery in what slavery has been in, even like before our lifetime, in the United States. Oftentimes, slave owners would rape their slaves. So you had a lot of mixed children that came out of that. These slave owners would have children with their slaves, and that is nothing new. If you're going to physically, emotionally oppress and abuse people, you begin to see them as objects. You do what you want to with them. It's awful. It's awful. Slavery is still something that exists, and it's what we're seeing here in Exodus is nothing. I mean, it still exists in the sense of the oppression or whatever. So I think it's absolutely fair to say and believe, because Scripture does say, like you said, mixed people groups. So it wasn't just all Hebrew. It was from all types.
When you think about what led to the Hebrew captivity in the beginning was this great famine that had stretched across all the land. But Joseph, with the foresight to prepare and store up, brought a lot of people into Egypt from all over.
Well, he brought wisdom. He saved Egypt. But that's what it says, that the new king or the new Pharaoh didn't even know about it.
That's right. He didn't know that. But we have this mixed multitude. And so a lot of people en masse are converting to Judaism.
Right.
And are accepted.
Absolutely.
And they leave.
From other cultures, not just Egyptian culture, from other cultures that are there and they're converting, which I think that it's such a beautiful picture because it shows that even before Jesus, God was for people.
Absolutely. There was a way made.
Right.
And all that leads me to be able to accept the idea that perhaps Pharaoh's daughter had converted.
Right. Absolutely. Now, are we sitting here and are we going to die on that hill? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And my mind is open to be changed.
Absolutely. Well, that is the beauty of discipleship. That's the beauty of getting in the Word and recognizing it for what it is. we should constantly be growing, constantly teachable, constantly open to, wait a minute, there's more to God than this. This is not just a children's story we learned in Sunday school. There is so much depth. And for what we're discussing, women played a huge part in that.
They did. And this is why, not just women, but this is why everyone's story is important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so then we get to the next girl, Zipporah. I like her too. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Zipporah. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I want to skip ahead in Moses' life. So we're kind of jumping from his infancy and childhood on up to the day he meets the woman of his dreams. No,
as he's running from Pharaoh.
Absolutely. I think a lot of people kind of know that story of Moses, what happens.
Right.
So Moses is on the run from Egypt. He approaches a well, and there are some maidens, some female shepherds.
A bunch of sisters
Right. At the well, and they are being kind of catcalled and hackled by some male shepherds.
Right.
And they're not able to water their flocks. So Moses comes along and runs off these bad guys.
Right.
Opens the well and waters the flocks for the female shepherds. And they run back and tell their father,
right,
a man named Reuel. And we find out later on he has another name. He's called Jethro.
Jethro is he's so country. He's a sheep farmer. Jethro the sheep farmer.
Jethro the sheep farmer.
Like that fits in our culture, right? Like, oh, Jethro down there, he's a sheep farmer.
Right. It does fit. It does fit in our culture, but he seems like a super duper wise man.
Absolutely, with a lot of girls.
So, but when he finds this out from his daughters, he says, bring him here, and basically they host him, and circumstances occur, and Jethro gives his daughter Zipporah to be Moses' wife.
Right.
And Zipporah likes this arrangement.
Yes, absolutely.
She loves Moses.
So fast forward, then he is working for Jethro, keeping sheep.
Yes.
You said something, and I do want to touch on this because we can.
Okay.
You said they were all shepherdess. Do you know historically, most shepherds in that day and time were women? The majority were women. Still to this day, if you go to places in the Middle East, oftentimes they're young girls that are shepherds. I just think that's a fun fact. Wanted to throw that in there.
I think that's a beautiful piece of information to know. I also think it makes perfect sense. Women are so nurturing, not that men aren't. And it just seems sort of like a natural role. But let's not kid ourselves. They were on rocky, hilly land. This wasn't an easy job.
No. And oftentimes little boys were out there being babysat by their sisters while their sisters worked. So anyway, that's just a side note. That wasn't even anything we were going to talk about.
It was free.
But okay, so now moving on, he is watching his father-in-law's sheep. He has the burning bush experience. God calls him back to Egypt, and
Moses has a job to do.
Right.
He's going to face Pharaoh. A hard job, a scary job, an unenviable job.
Right.
He's going to lead the Hebrew children out of Egypt. He's going to face Pharaoh. He's going to see some of the amazing, terribly miraculous things that God can do.
Right.
A display of power that we can't imagine. And he wants to leave, so he takes his wife and his children. We know that he has 2 sons by now with Zipporah. And he goes about to do what is told to him.
Right.
And along the way, something strange happens.
In Exodus chapter 4.
That's correct.
I think that's important that we do make sure we reference these things, because his encounter with Zipporah was basically in Exodus 2:15 through 22. But then in 4 verses 24 through 26, that's where what you're about to talk about says.
That's right. So in Exodus chapter 4, they're on their way back into Egypt.
Right.
With little other information given before or after this tiny event that takes just 2 or 3 verses, we see something happen that has boggled the minds of theologians and historians for generations. And we're not about to solve it here.
Well, let's just read it so we can make sure everybody knows they're on the same page. In verse 24, it says, on the way to Egypt, at a place where Moses and his family had stopped for the night, the Lord confronted him and was about to kill him. It's like, wait, what? He was, what's wrong, God?
What'd you do,
Bad
boy?
day? Like, what happened? And then it says at verse 25, but Moses' wife Zipporah took a flint knife and circumcised her son. She touched his feet, Moses' feet, with the foreskin and said, now you are a bridegroom of blood to me. When she said a bridegroom of blood, she was referring to the circumcision. After that, the Lord left him alone. It's like, wait, what just happened?
Okay.
So
then,
weird.
And then back to your regularly scheduled programming. So I've heard this story retold, and the person retelling the story said it in such a way that really came alive in my mind and made me want to seek this out. The person telling this story, and I can't remember exactly who it was, said that Zipporah flung the foreskin onto Moses. Flung it. That's just
gross.
It is so gross. And so I'm like, who is this chick who's throwing around foreskins? And thus the study of Zipporah.
Right. But there was something significant. Whether she flung it, she laid it, she dropped it, it was on his feet.
It was a deeply symbolic act.
Absolutely.
And why? And what does this tell us about Zipporah? And why does it matter? Well, let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
So Moses and Zipporah have these two sons, Gershom, and I can't remember the name of the other son. Why was this son not circumcised? The Bible doesn't say.
But it was already Hebrew tradition to circumcise your children. And
on the eighth day.
And you know what? Zipporah knew that. Zipporah knew Gershom and Eleazar.
Eliezer. Yeah. Something
Elixir.
Like that.
His name was Elixir.
E. Let's just call him E.
Big E.
Zipporah did know that.
Right.
The significance of it was not lost on her. But let me make another point here. At the risk of poking the patriarchy a little bit, Moses knew it too.
He did know it.
Yet Gershom was not circumcised.
Right.
He was the oldest and therefore old enough to be circumcised. But here's what we do know according to Jewish tradition. Jethro and Zipporah were Midianites.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Jethro was a Midianite priest.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
The tradition of the Midianites was to not circumcise their sons until they had become betrothed.
Right.
So,
which is awful.
I cannot. Look, you have really got to like the girl.
That's called commitment, people.
That's right. Forget your engagement ring. The tradition amongst the Midianites was to not circumcise their sons until they were betrothed.
Right.
And then once they were healed, the wedding could take place. So many believe that a deal that Moses might have made with his father-in-law when he was given Zipporah was that my first child will be raised in the Midianite tradition and my other children will be raised in the Hebrew tradition. It wasn't a pronouncement of belief.
It was an honor thing.
It was an honor. It was just a respectful thing. So that may be why Gershom wasn't circumcised, but that's neither here nor there.
And it may also be, let's take into account, when in Rome.
Absolutely.
He was with Midianite people. So it wasn't something that the God had been very clear to Moses. He'd been very clear to him, but he's not around Hebrew people. He is around Midianite people. So whether that is the case or not, Moses knew better.
And let's just cut Moses some slack here. He kind of had some stuff going on.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah, people want to kill him.
And I mean, Moses has endured a lot of things up until when he stood up for his people. Moses is a great guy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we know by his own admission, he's non-confrontational.
Well, and he's on his way to the biggest confrontation in the history of confrontations.
Absolutely.
And he's probably not thinking, hey, did we cut what needed to be cut before we left for this road trip?
So we're cutting Moses some slack here.
Right.
The point is, Zipporah knows.
She does.
It would have been somewhat disrespectful for her as a woman to circumcise her sons. So she's off the hook for the child not being circumcised up to this point as well.
But also she was a woman who honored her husband.
She was a woman
She
who honored her husband.
understood that he was the head. This is the way it's to be. But I think in this moment, because the Bible says, I mean, it doesn't say, and Zipporah knew that God was about to kill Moses.
Oh, right.
She didn't. But obviously, she knew something.
She knew something was up.
She knew something was going on, and she was willing to take one for the team and did this not in a, you idiot, why didn't you do this?
Right.
But that's how it's been taught. Like, can I just be honest? Like, when I've heard this story, she was disrespectful to Moses, or she was mad at him for not doing it. Mm-hmm. But I don't believe that's the case.
I believe.
Do you? I mean, no. I don't see it that way at all.
I don't see it that way at all. What I'm seeing here is a story of a relationship of mutual respect.
Absolutely.
And now they are pressed. And Moses is in a position where when we read that the angel of God had come and fought with Moses and sought to kill him, we don't know. I mean, like, was he slinging a blade at him, or was he struck down with some sickness? Like, we don't know. But I think it's safe to say that he was incapacitated and probably couldn't perform this circumcision himself. And so what do we do as women who want to serve their families well when there's a gap? We step in.
Right.
It was not to be disrespectful to Moses, I don't believe.
I believe it was just as if any of us would be who love our husbands. If he was in a position where, what do I need to do? How can I help?
How can I help you?
How can I support you? Right?
So,
but when she told him, she said, now you are, this is in verse 25, now you are a bridegroom of blood to me. I just truly believe that that was her way of saying, remember who you are. Like, I know you're scared. I know that this is a lot. I know that you're going back to the place that you ran away from. I know God's asking a lot of you. And I don't know what's going on right now. God's upset with the way you're doing something.
Right.
Some believe that it was because he brought her and the kids with him. Because God called Moses. He didn't say, take your family. He said, just go. I don't know if that's true. There's a lot of theologians that want to debate that. It's neither here nor there. The reality is there was something that upset God, and she knew it. And she places through, flung whatever, this foreskin on his feet and said, basically, remember who you are. Right. Do the right thing.
Do the right thing.
Do the right thing. I'm here to, and I love that. I'm here to where you don't have to always feel like you're the only one that has to do the right thing.
You know, I also think, I agree with you 100%, but I think there's a little bit of a double meaning there. I think she was also saying, hey, I'm bought in. I'm bought into your calling.
Absolutely. And you know what? I think as women, if you are going to marry a man of God, as a Christian, that should be what you're looking for. We need to be bought into what God's asking of him. Because whether you like it or not, we're going to stand before God all of us are going to stand before God on our actions and our reactions and how we obey God and how we handle our family, how we respond to our husbands, how we respond to the world. That's on us.
You know, it is on us. And I can't help but think when God created Adam and then created Eve, and Eve was presented to Adam, we've often been taught that he was given her as a helpmeet, is the word that was used most of my life growing up. But if you study that out and you study the language in the Hebrew, I'm going to butcher this word. God calls Eve Ezer Kenegdo, Ezerkenegdo, I believe. Ezer Kenegdo. Look it up. The more appropriate translation today, now that our language has evolved, would be counterbalance.
Right.
And Zipporah, in my view, is being a counterbalance to Moses.
Well, she's letting him lead in his rightful position.
Absolutely.
I know there's a lot of women that are like, God's not called men to lead. Yes, he has. Yes, he has. He's called them to lead. He's called them to love their wives as Christ loves the church. And he's called women to honor their husband. That's taken out of context a lot. That doesn't mean that you become a slave to your husband. But if you understand the calling on his life, the responsibility to spiritually lead your home, to spiritually lead your family, that doesn't mean that you're a fragile flower off to the side, that you don't have a voice. It is, you are to use your voice to support the calling of your family.
Right. let me throw this out here, maybe a bad example, but if my husband were an ox plowing in the field at a yoke, I wasn't called to stand across the ditch and yell encouraging words at him. My job is to get on the other side of that yoke and push with him. I am here to help balance his load.
Right.
And however that looks in your relationship,
right. Absolutely. So I just think that she's just cool for stepping in and being like, hey, I got you.
I think she's really cool.
I've got you.
And we really don't hear much more about Zipporah after that in the Bible. She does come up one other time, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in this same podcast. But it's more, what was God telling us in those 2 or 3 little verses about Zipporah? Because she's only in 2 or 3 verses, does that make her role insignificant? And the answer is no. There are billions upon billions of women who have been in this world since the beginning of time.
Right.
And this lady made it into the Bible, even if for only a brief mention. But what a strong mention it was.
Well, yeah, it's powerful. So then let's jump back to Miriam.
Let's jump back to Miriam
because she is now older, and we see in Exodus 15, 1 through 18, oftentimes people call this the Song of Moses, but it's actually the Song of Moses and Miriam. Mm-hmm. Miriam was a worship leader. Mm-hmm. Miriam led the Hebrew children out in worship.
Absolutely.
And in Exodus 15, 1 through 18, all those verses are the song that they sang mm-hmm. as they're crossing out and leaving Egypt. In Exodus 15, 20 and 21, it says that she took a timbrel in her hand and she led the women in music and song and dance to celebrate God delivering them. I love that Miriam was a leader among the women.
Absolutely.
The men were educated, the men were taught, but the women were too by Miriam. Mm-hmm. And it is an incredible thing to see that, and this might ruffle some feathers, but I'm here for it. I don't care.
We are feather rufflers.
We're feather rufflers. Okay.
Can I get that on a t-shirt?
Yeah, yes, girl. The idea that we have to, as women, feel like we have to compete with men to find our place. How about just be who you're supposed to be?
That's right.
You can, like Miriam, in a time, she was leading women. She was educating women. She was training women. She wasn't trying to say, let me take over all of this. She was willing to take the place that God gave her.
Absolutely. And let me throw this out there. Moses and Aaron weren't threatened by Miriam's ministry or the call on her life.
Well, they saw it as a support.
Absolutely.
They saw it as, we need your help. Miriam, and there's something powerful, and this could be a totally different podcast down the road, but the power of worship in the midst of, throughout the Word of God, you see battles and all these things, time after time after time, battle after war, won and started and ended with worship. The fact that Miriam started this exodus in worship shows that worship is significant in the movement of God in our life. It is.
Absolutely.
Worship sets a precedence. It establishes the atmosphere, and it gets our hearts prepared for where God's taking us, even when we don't see and understand.
To use some common vernacular, Miriam was a whole mood. We've heard...
Girl, you're a mood.
You are a mood. We've heard that cliche, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Right.
Miriam was filled with worship and praise, and she led the others. Now, what do you think would have happened if they would have stepped out on the other shore and she was like, my new sandals, ruined, look at all this mud? What would have happened? But that's not what she did. She responded appropriately.
Right.
She sang and she worshiped and she led. And I think as women, we need to grasp the power in our words and the power in our actions and the power in our worship and how that affects everyone around us.
Right. Well, we know that Miriam's so in Micah 6:4, it says, I brought you up out of Egypt and redeemed you from the land of slavery. I sent Moses to lead you, also Aaron and Miriam. Micah references Miriam as seeing her as this woman. I mean, she's mentioned as a prophetess in Exodus 15, 20, and 21, right? But also in Numbers 12 as well. She's mentioned throughout. And you're like, oh, well, she was perfect and she was great. She wasn't, because Moses had 2 wives. Later on, he took on another wife, right?
Well,
Some people believe that the other wife that they're talking about was still Zipporah.
yeah, that's another hotly debated thing here.
Yes. And others believe that the second wife was a Cushite woman.
Right.
Right?
So
in Numbers 12, 1 through 10, it talks about the Cushite woman.
The Cushite woman. So we do know that there was a land called Cush. And so this woman could have been from the land of Cush and therefore the Cushite woman. But we also know historically that the term Cushite or Cush was often used as a slang term and not in a flattering way. And we know that Zipporah was a particularly beautiful woman, and that term Cushite would be meant to imply that a person is different or looks different. And so regardless of whom this woman is, she's Moses' wife, and she's being spoken of in a derogatory manner.
I think let's just, for the sake of kind of debating it, I've heard both sides, right? That Cushite was, that it was slang. I've also heard that Cushite was slang for Ethiopian, which means that, is it possible that the Cushite woman was the Midianite woman? Yes. Is it possible that he took on another wife later on down the road because he sent his wife? Remember, scripture says that he sent his wife back, and then her daddy brought her and the boys back.
That's right.
It was like, you're going to do something about this.
I know.
So either way, there was some disrespect, whether it was, because I've listened to people full on debate this mess. I'm like, why does it matter?
It doesn't matter, especially for the point that we're trying to make here. And that is that Miriam, for all her good qualities, ran her mouth a little bit. That's right.
She had some words.
A little jealousy maybe rose up.
Right.
And she said, tell us what she said.
You tell me. I like the way you say it.
She basically was saying, who does Moses think he is? Now he's got that pretty little Cushite wife. Have we not done amazing things?
Who do you think you
That's
are?
Right. That's right. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. And God said, I'll check you.
Yes.
And he gave her a little skin condition.
Not just a little skin condition, leprosy, but it was white. I've seen in scripture, it's like white spot leprosy.
He made her emo.
So it was because she was darker.
Right.
Her leprosy was not just dark sores. It was white. So she had like leopard spots on her, like backwards. And it was obvious, and it was considered
unclean.
And so she couldn't be around. But then who went to bat for her in prayer?
Moses. We know Moses to be a great intercessor.
Yes.
And I think there's an entire possibility that Moses' wife may have also prayed on her behalf as well. The Bible doesn't say that. That's totally from my own mind.
But the reality is, there's no indication anywhere in scripture that there was a rift between the two of them moving forward. So there was forgiveness of some sort. So whether, and please don't get lost in the weeds of, so did Moses have one wife or did he have two wives?
Absolutely.
Most people believe a lot of people believe one that was seen as different. The reality is it doesn't matter. It may matter to you. If it matters to you, cool. You go and let it matter to you.
Well, go find out and let us know.
Yeah, seriously. Because I've grown up believing that it was two different women, but I've heard the other debate that it was the Cushite phrase was slang, but I grew up believing that the second wife was Ethiopian and the first wife was Midian. But that they also, some people believe, well, that is a culture in itself together. So it's like, well, does it matter? Who cares? His sister Miriam was super rude. Moses prayed 7 days. She had leprosy. And then God set her free, cleansed her, and then they moved on. And it's incredible how then she continued to lead the women.
Let me tell you why I love this part of Miriam's story. Not because we see a flaw in an otherwise admirable woman. That's not why I love this story. I love this story because in those few verses, Miriam becomes so real and so relatable to me. And God said, hey, feeling a little testy there? How about a timeout?
Right. Well, we do it with our kids.
Absolutely. He said, you go over here outside the camp, have a little alone time, some quiet time, think about what you've said. And when you're ready, you come back.
Right.
And nobody's going to be mad about it.
Yeah.
And Miriam becomes so real and so relatable. And I appreciate that about her.
Absolutely. So, Aimee, in looking at all of these women in Moses's life, like, what's our takeaway? What's the, I think, to me, I think the takeaway is we live in a world where there is hardship, not like they did in Egypt. Let's be honest. Some people think that because they didn't get to the dry cleaners in time to pick up their stuff, the world's over. Not the same. Okay.
Right.
But in seasons of hardship, in seasons of oppression and difficulty, because let's be honest, there are people right now, men and women in this country that are still very much oppressed.
Absolutely.
There are churches that oppress women. There are communities that oppress women. There are people groups and ethnicities that are oppressed in different regions of this country. Like, you can't deny it. And I'm not going to sit and debate that with anybody. It's a fact. And the reality is people feel that way. There is a scandal going on right now in a church not far from us where the music minister, basically because she was a minor, raped a young girl in the church. And the church as a whole wants this guy to get off and not be in trouble. And they're finding fault in the girl. And not all I don't want to say the whole church, but the majority. The courtroom was full of the church on the side of the man who did what he did and not for the girl.
And if I'm not mistaken, the father of this man, who is a very well-respected man in his organization, is refusing to say that this minor girl is a victim.
Right. And he's also gone as far, and there's reports that have proven he's gone to different people in the church, including her family members, asking for leniency. The reality is, it's so funny. Nobody gets to decide that. It's illegal in the United States to do what he did. It was wrong. And so, nevertheless, that I just say that to say there are still people oppressed. There are still, we have all kinds of things going on racially, there's oppression. So all that to say, what do you do in that? What do we do as women, as men, as Christians, as people who are trying to figure out your faith in this? What can we learn from these little ladies here in Moses's life? And even Moses, I guess, but what do we learn? I think that what we learn is in times of hardship, it is still important to say yes. And I think what you see with them, they just said yes to the next thing.
They did.
It's when you are like, I can't take any more, and the Lord says, I need you to do this. Can you say yes? Can you say yes? And it wasn't about, hey, Moses, Moses didn't know growing up in the palace that he was going to later come back and set people free. He just responded. Miriam didn't know that when she was in the reeds watching her baby brother float down the river, that later on she would be singing through that same river to take all of the people out of Egypt. Jochebed did not know what was going to happen when she said, yes, God, I'll protect this baby, that later she would nurse him for him to grow up to be what set them free. They did not know the outcome. They just knew the next yes was important.
So you just said something. I've often learned, and you've probably heard this too, that every story in the Bible points towards Jesus Christ.
Absolutely.
And you just spoke about Jochebed, a mother who would give birth to her own deliverer.
Right. Which is exactly what Mary did with Jesus.
And it's just beautiful. But I think what you're saying about these women doing the next right thing and all the hardship brought with them, it's spot on. And it's very reflective of the lives we live today. I'd like to make the point that these women had very different backgrounds, very different levels of privilege, of advantage and disadvantage. They were slaves. They were princesses. They were stay-at-home moms. They were working women.
Right.
They all pointed the way to something bigger than themselves.
So then that's what we do.
It's what we do.
We do that. We need to look at our situation and not go, oh my goodness. If you're a mom of young kids and you feel like you're stuck in this monotonous life, say yes. Pointing them to growing up to be who God called them to be. Say yes to the season that you're in. Say yes to, I will push through this hard day, because although this is a hard season, it doesn't mean it has to be a hard life. And it is overcoming and pushing through. I just think what a beautiful reminder to us.
Right. And it may not look like pitching a tiny boat for your baby, or
please don't.
Or circumcising your own son. That's right.
Don't do either one of those things.
Please seek medical advice before giving your son a circumcision.
And don't put your kid in a basket and put him, that's it. You'll get taken to jail.
That's right.
That's
right.
Well, I read it in the Bible and I just thought that don't be crazy.
And maybe don't talk ugly about your sister-in-law.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Just be nice. Be nice.
But, do the next right thing. But the big thing that matters for your family may not look like circumcising your own son. It may look like picking up that laundry that didn't quite make it into the basket one more time.
Right. It may be embracing a neighbor that's different than you.
Exactly. It may look like knowing what to say and when to say it, but also knowing when to keep your mouth closed.
I was on a flight. It's been a couple years ago, because it was pre-COVID, because I didn't have a mask on. There was a mom that was flying with a newborn baby and a toddler.
Oh.
And that toddler had all kinds of pressure in his head, because you can tell he was pulling his ears. It was hurting, and she was crying, and she was a row across from me, one row back. Everybody's getting frustrated because both babies are crying. And I'm looking around, and there's all these businessmen and these businesswomen, and obviously parents, but frustrated that there are children that are too young to understand that are crying. Nobody's doing anything. The flight attendant kept saying, ma'am, can I help you with something? I'm like, what are you going to give them, your little package and a half of pretzels? Like, get on, go. So I got up and I went over and I said, hey, I'm a mom. And she just looked at me like, and I said, can I give me the baby? I'm right here. You can see me, and you take care of your toddler. Because that toddler was not going to come to me.
Oh,
but that
absolutely.
baby didn't know what was going on. And I sat there. So she was able to then pull that toddler into her lap and hold him and rock him. And I told her, I said, do you have any bottles? And she said, yes. And I said, put his juice in a bottle. She said, well, we broke him from the bottle. I said, sister, just trust me. Mm-hmm. She put that juice in the bottle and let him, as he was maybe a year and a half, 2 years old, let him drink that juice from the bottle. It helped his ears. Mm-hmm. And I held that baby for that whole flight, and I was really upset that she thought I had to give her back, because I'm like, I thought we had an agreement here. I said, give me your baby. You gave me your baby. It's now mine. I'm just kidding. But it was the idea of, I could have said, that's not my problem.
Right.
I would have loved to have slept on the plane. I was traveling. I was tired. I had been doing a ministry conference. I was very tired. But that was the next yes in that moment for me. I've been doing ministry all week. I'm exhausted. Somebody else should step up. There's a plane full of people, and I know most of these jokers are moms and dads. But that's not what the Lord was saying to me in that moment, was not find somebody else. It was, you do this. Mm-hmm. And she was able to calm that little buddy down, and it was all better. And I'm not just saying, hey, look at me, I did this, but it's more of we've got to look for those opportunities in hard times, in uncomfortable times, in times when, well, what about me moments, that we just do the right thing for the sake of somebody else.
What you did was you linked arms with this mom.
Yeah.
You helped her cross the finish line. I think that's the lesson that a lot of these women are teaching us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm excited about this. Please take the time to subscribe and like, and y'all have a great day, and join us next time. I'm Amber Noble, and you have been listening to Grounds for Conversations. To ensure you don't miss our next podcast, make sure you subscribe, rate, and review. Don't forget to hang around for an extra shot. right, welcome to our extra shot today, again with my guest and friend, Aimee Raggio. So I think today's topic is something that needs to be discussed. And I think one of the best things that COVID has done is shut so much of this down. And that is the topic of buffets.
Don't even get me started.
Oh, I'm going to get you started because I think it's something we need to talk about. I want to go ahead and set the stage for those of you listeners that love buffets. I'm not anti a buffet of food. But
I am.
No, you're not, because if it was at your house, you set up buffets all the time.
Oh, at my own house is a different story.
And it's not even necessarily the buffet of food. I think it's the people that frequent them. And so what is your thoughts? Because I definitely have some, but I will refrain until you get started. What are your thoughts, Aimee?
My thoughts summed up in 2 words: hate them.
Hate's a strong word, sister.
And I said it with full force.
I said what I said.
I know.
Yeah. So let me tell you about a buffet experience that almost sent me into counseling.
Let me set my coffee down.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay.
This is real talk. We were in Ohio. My husband's family is all from Ohio. And we went to a buffet. I don't know why. Like, his mom and sisters could outcook anything we would eat out. But there we were at a buffet. I believe we were in Ohio. I'm almost positive. It doesn't matter. We were at a buffet somewhere. Buffet will never be my choice. Never be my choice. Now, that doesn't mean, when I was younger, I'm not hating on a Luby's or a Furs where they serve the food.
That's a cafeteria.
It's cafeteria. Like, there's a place, there's all around us is Salata that you go in and it's like a buffet of salad, but they make it for you.
And there's a splash guard.
And they all have hairnets on, which I respect.
I do too.
I love that. Okay, so that's not what I'm talking about. I like the Luby's. I'm not hating on Luby's. I'm not hating on Furs Cafeteria or anything like that.
I'm going to just say it out loud. We're going all in on that place whose initials start with GC.
Yes. Or Ryan's. Do you remember Ryan's?
Ryan's or Quincy's. Do those even exist anymore?
If they do, they shouldn't.
I agree.
And anyway, so yeah, GC. I think that's actually where we were at, was good old GC.
Okay.
And I'm in there and I am such a people watcher. Now, you know this about me. I'm a germ freak. I have big curly hair, but you're not allowed in my kitchen while your hair's down. I don't care if you're unloading the dishwasher, you're getting a drink, like, pull your hair up, because I don't want your hair anywhere in the kitchen. I keep my hair up. If I'm cooking and I taste something, that spoon goes in the dishwasher, I don't use that same spoon again. That's disgusting. Not even for my own family. I don't do it. I don't double dip. I think it's gross. So, I have a standard on which I operate, and I just kind of feel like everybody else should operate from that same standard.
As the Lord ordains.
So we're in this GC, and I feel like we should probably say that because I feel like that somebody's going to get mad, even though they know what we're talking about. We're in there, and I'm looking around, and there is a baseball team of boys that are all under the age of 12, and their parents that look like they have been outside for 4 days at baseball tournaments with no showers or sleep. And it just looks grimy and grungy. And then there's a lot of families, and which is why do people go to buffets? Because there's something for everybody. Now, I raised a teenage boy. I raised and Phil, my husband, would take him and his friends to see, which CC's grosses me out more than anything. But they loved it. They would go and they would eat. CC's would see these boys coming and just go, we're about to lose money, because they would eat until it shut down.
In theory, this is a reasonable idea.
It is. But I am at this buffet with Phil and family. And there's this woman and understand I'm not body shaming. I'm a big girl. I'm not body shaming. But you can be clean and you can have some self-respect. And I do feel like places like buffets are for people who've just given up. They're just like, I give up.
I think buffets are the perfect place for people who want everything to taste like green beans to go. It just how it is.
Or to justify eating all starch.
I mean, or cover everything in gravy.
There you go. Which I'm not anti covering things in gravy. I'm a Southern girl. I love gravy. But anyway, we're there in this GC and this woman grabs the tray. Well, what do you, just play along with me here, Aimee. What do you usually grab after you grab a tray at a buffet?
A plate.
A plate. God forbid you don't. Well, she decided, you know what? I am at this GC. I am bigger than all outside. I'm not wearing a bra.
Hold more breadsticks.
Oh, gross. I don't know. I mean, she was just very unkept. Like, you can be clean at all sizes, okay? She was very unkept. And you could say, well, why are you judging her? Because she's right where I'm getting my food, okay?
She's on your food.
She was definitely on my food. So she's got this tray. She does not grab a plate. She proceeds to put her mashed potatoes directly on the tray and then ladles gravy over it. There was enough mashed potatoes on that plate. Like, if you go to Popeyes and you get a family meal for 4 to 6 people, she had enough mashed potatoes for those 4 to 6 people and then 4 of their friends on one tray. Then she gets over to the chicken. She puts an entire chicken on her plate. She's got both legs. Like, she's got it all. She's got it all. She's doing this. She looks back at me. I'm behind her with this look of pure horror on my face, looks back at me and asks me to hand her a napkin. You see one? Just one napkin?
Just the one.
What? And so she goes through and does all that and then says, I don't have room for my dessert. I'll have to come back. And I look at Phil and Phil like almost doesn't want to make eye contact with me because he knows I'm done. I set my tray down and I went and got a drink and I sat down. And Phil said, you're not going to eat, are you? I was like, no, I'm not. I'm done. I have completely lost my appetite.
It's because you are a reasonable human being.
Well, what makes a person say, it's not necessary for me to put a bra on, so I'm going to go to GC. And I'm going to eat until I die there. Because that's what this lady was setting herself up to die at GC that day.
Okay, I'm giving her a pass on the bra because
I'm not.
Already given up.
If you're using a tray as a plate, you've completely given up on life.
You've given up. Clearly, foundational garments aren't important to her.
It was awful. Okay, so then that was my experience, my last, and I love good food. So but I don't want to sound like I'm a snob. I am not. Like, I'm just gonna be real. I am not anti a taco from Taco Bell. Like, I will do.
I agree. Taco Bell is its own food genre.
Okay, Wendy's, fries and a Frosty. Like, I've been known for that to be my lunch. I don't want anybody to listen because, well, you just think you're too good for buffets. No, I just think buffets shouldn't be. Unless you have somebody, if there is not just a sneeze guard, that's not enough. Because you know how they do sneeze guards and buffets for adults that are 6'4". Everybody my height and below, they're right there eye to eye with that food.
Well,
all the children that should not be allowed to serve their own food at a buffet, children.
There will be. And listen, there is a person whom I love with all my heart who will remain nameless here. But I get so aggravated because we're at, say, Subway, and they are leaning over. You can't see me because this is audio, but I'm pointing with my finger. They're pointing over the little splash guard at what they want. And I will always say, put your hand behind the glass. Like, you can say, please put the bell peppers.
Well, you're not talking about me because
no, I am not.
Can't reach over the glass. But yeah, okay. So what are your thoughts on the buffet? You say you hate them, but why? What's your reasoning on that?
Okay. First of all, I just don't think that food that is like kept in that warm. Now look, you have to keep your food temperature controlled. I understand that. But food that's just kept at a warm state for long periods of time, it's just going to be mushy and overcooked. So first of all, I think the quality of food suffers. I think the taste of food suffers. That all
You act like
aside,
the people at buffets are just getting a little bit. They're not keeping in there a long time. They're having to constantly refill it because Big Booty Judy had her tray of mashed potatoes right before the next person.
you've seen how I eat. I'm probably not eating those, I'm not going in for the mac and cheese. I'm over there at the salad bar, I'm the only person that eats the radishes. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm eating, but this stuff's been sitting there all day.
And my father-in-law.
It's been sitting there all day. I think all the food kind of tastes alike. But
Like
all
a Chinese
that aside,
buffet. It all has the exact same taste.
all that aside, here are people who are not sworn by their restaurant employers or even required by law to wash their hands.
Yes.
Or practice any sort of hygiene, and they are essentially handling the food that you're about to consume.
Yes.
Now,
They're flipping through the chicken to find the piece they want, and they've touched every single one.
You are correct that I host people at my house a lot, and I do set up buffets almost weekly. But you got to understand these are small, controlled environments.
Listen, if somebody comes into my house, and I love to have people in my home, I do. I love to do spreads that people can enjoy and there's stuff for everybody. I love that. Love that. But if you're in my home, I do not have a problem telling you, go wash your hands. I don't have a problem with that. And if you have a problem with that, that's your problem, not mine.
Right. And you and I both, we have dogs that are in our home.
No, wrong. You have dogs in your home. My husband has a dog in our home. That is not the truth. There is a dog that lives in this house that belongs to my husband and my children. It does not belong to me.
I go to great lengths to keep pet hair up at my house.
Yes, ma'am, me too.
And before I cook food, I lint roll my whole body, like my clothes. I just want to be sure there aren't any little pet hairs in my food.
And I respect you for that.
I believe.
Can I stop for a second? Like, that's one of the many reasons I love you, because you care about details.
I care about people, and I love my dogs, but even I don't want pet hair in my mouth or on my food. I would never expect my guests to be okay with that. But at a buffet, no one is telling the cat lady that she's got to lint roll herself before she serves herself another piece of cornbread.
Or what about little Samantha that is licking her fingers as she's trying to get Jell-O?
Okay,
stop it.
You told your experience at a buffet. Let me tell you what I saw.
Oh, I need to hear it.
At the last time I was at a buffet.
When? How long ago was it? Your last time?
Oh, years.
Yeah, mine too.
So I've lived in Texas almost 10 years, and this was pre-Texas.
Good for you.
Right. I know. I'm here now.
Yeah.
Lyle Lovett sings a song that says, "That's right, you're not from Texas, but Texas wants you anyway." And I thought that was a funny song before, but now I understand that it is almost a national anthem here. So this was years ago, and I was in the buffet that shall remain unnamed.
GC,
whose initials were GC. I was with a family that had a lot of children, a family that I love, a family that I respect, don't get me wrong. But they were a large family with lots of little children. And as is common in big families, these children were very self-sufficient.
Yes.
So they helped themselves to the buffet.
And their siblings.
That's right. And this particular buffet had a chocolate fountain with all sorts of things that could be dipped into it. And I watched those children stand at that chocolate fountain, and they double, triple, and quadruple dipped. And they even went in with their fingers.
No, ma'am.
And licked their fingers.
That's when I would start spanking somebody else's children.
And listen, to this day, I would swear to you that there will be a chocolate fountain in hell.
Full of mayonnaise.
Oh, God. No, don't. And gravy of questionable source. I don't care how well-to-do you are and how fancy your wedding reception is. If there is a fountain spewing anything, I'm not partaking. Unless, there is a guy there with white gloves who is doing the dipping for you on a 14-inch long skewer. Food does not come in fountains or in buffets. Also, you know me. I take an issue with excess.
Yes. Well, that's the problem is people go into those places starving to death and their eyes are bigger than their stomach, or they should be. I mean, how many times have you said to your kids, and I know you have, and I know I've said it to mine a million times, because especially when they're growing up, and my kids are both adults. You've got 2 adults and you've got a teenager. When they were younger and they were growing, and it's like they ate all the time. Mm-hmm. We would never withhold food from our kids. But if we were out and one of my 2 would say, I want this and this and this, we would say, order this first. Right. And if you're still hungry afterwards, we will get this. There's no need to start off like a wild banshee.
That's right. Your 4-year-old probably doesn't need the porterhouse loaded baked potato. Get him the steak bites.
Get him chicken nuggets.
That's
Come
right.
on.
I mean, I just, I take issue with excess and I take issue with waste. And
I think that's part of my thing too. Yes.
Okay. And let me just, I want to say something and hear me loud and clear. Chances are most of the people listening to this are ladies. And I'm just going to go ahead and beg the pardon of all you little Texas ladies who can't wait for Round Top to open up each year so that you can go and fluff up your wardrobe. But let me say this and hear me and know my heart, because I love you. We don't buy our dresses in barns and we don't eat from troughs.
I love Round Top.
I do too, but we don't buy our dresses from barns. Say it. Repeat after me.
Well, what about the dress barn? Like, who thought that was a good idea?
That's what I'm saying.
I want you to feel beautiful.
Hey, Amber, let's go on down to the Golden Corral, and after, we'll shop at the dress barn. Maybe they carry Sag Harbor.
Oh, okay, so listen, you said something and I never even thought about it. Part of the issue for me with buffets is waste. And I know that my children, because they've grown up going on missions trips, and I lived on the mission field. Missions is a big part of my life. We go all the time. Both of my kids learned really quickly after seeing kids who did not eat for days on end, how sad it is to walk past a table where somebody has left and it's full of half-eaten food. Like, we were in the airport in Miami and both my kids had just been in Haiti. We ran into Chili's because that's what was open, and we had a layover, and walking out of Chili's where there had been people that had left half their food. Both of my kids really had a hard time with that because what they had just seen. And so it was a great life lesson of, if you're not real hungry, share something. Or if you don't, it's okay to order something small or order several a la cartes, because you don't need the full kit and caboodle. Like, if you're in a Mexican restaurant and you don't want the beans, say that. Don't let them put them on your plate so that you can waste them. It's okay to say, can you hold the beans? They're not back in the kitchen mad that they're not plating beans on your plate.
Right.
Like, do better.
Do better.
Don't waste.
Right.
And a buffet is free for all. Waste, be gross.
This is going a whole lot more serious than I thought it would be. I agree with you 100%, by the way, but nobody's saying that it's a moral failure not to eat all the food on your plate.
Absolutely not.
Sometimes we serve ourselves more without realizing how filling it's going to be, or or we serve ourselves food not realizing that, hey, we were actually thirsty and misunderstood the cues.
Well, and I'm also going to be the first to admit that if it's disgusting, I'm not eating it. Unless I'm in another country and I know it's going to offend you. If I go to a restaurant and I order something and you serve me something subpar, I'm not eating it. Now, I'm not that person that sends it back and throws a fit. I know there's a lot of people like that out there. I have this fear that as soon as you send something back, they do things to it. Right. And I'm not messing with you and your angry self in the kitchen.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll just pay for it and I'll eat a bowl of cereal when I get home.
It's a matter of respect, and it's a cultural thing. Like, we're going to do this. But let's also talk about something that's very real, especially right now with what's going on in the world and inflation, it's food insecurity. So please don't think that we're being tone deaf here when we're talking about this. Right. We understand that there are people out there who need to feed a lot of people with a little bit of money.
Right.
And places like the old GC seem like a good value.
But you know what? If you have to serve a lot of people with a little bit of money, don't let your little nappy head dirty kids serve themselves. That's my whole point.
Oh, right. But my thing
Don't
is
be
this,
gross.
if you want to host a buffet, have some pride of place. Like I get to feed a lot of people. Let me keep this cleaned up around the edges.
Right.
And let me keep this fresh and let me do the best that I can.
I don't feel like our goal in this conversation was ever to attack people who have to. This is like, I don't want to make people upset. This has nothing to do with, I've got to feed 13 people. Well, okay. I'm sorry.
I know.
But this is more of we're talking about buffets and the culture that buffets attract.
Absolutely. Woo, rabbit trail. I am so good at rabbit trails, by the way.
I am too. Now, I will go back to the whole CC's attracts sports teams and teenage boys, middle school boys. And it's disgusting to me. I've been to CC's maybe 3 times in my life, but my kids would go every day when they were younger.
Okay.
If they could. And Phil will take them because he knows we can feed all 13 of these boys and they're going to get full.
Well, and let me just say this. We just talked about food waste. It hurts my feelings a lot less when they waste a $5 pizza than when they waste a $15 meal at a restaurant.
Okay, but I'm not, it's less about food waste. It's who needs to eat that much? That is like this, but I've never been like when you'd see those hot dog eating contests and stuff on TV and you'd see these adorable little Asian ladies that you're like, oh, she's so cute and so petite. And then she ate 150 hot dogs and you're like, how did you do that? And it's always like the littlest people. You expect it to be like the big people that can throw down. But I don't understand what's the point of wanting to do that. To say that you can. I don't ever want my claim to fame to be I ate 150 hot dogs. Like, live bigger, do better, find something else. But there's a place in Amarillo, Texas.
Oh, I know.
The
I
big
know
Texan.
where you're going, where you get to ring the bell.
And I used to think that it was the coolest thing because they got to eat on a stage. It was like up on a platform. You go to Amarillo, Texas, the big Texan, and if you can eat the 72-ounce steak, the sides, including the salad, within an amount of time, you don't have to pay for it. And as a kid, we would talk my papa into taking us there. And I loved watching the people that would get up there and try this to get it. But if they don't, they had to pay for it.
Right.
And that was fascinating to me because it was a contest. But the idea is that there's a lot of people that eat that amount of food every time they go to a buffet. It grosses me out. It grosses me out the need to consume that amount of food. It grosses me out that it's not clean. Not that the food's not clean. The people serving themselves the food is not clean.
Right.
It also grosses me out that there are certain things that don't go together. But for whatever reason, all that goes out the window with buffet. You don't pour brown gravy over shrimp.
That is so gross.
Like I watched a guy at a buffet make a salad. He did not put dressing on his salad. I don't know what in the world. I was like, who hurt you when you were a child? He had that just iceberg lettuce and some cheese, some fried shrimp, and then he poured brown gravy over top of it. And I just stood there and stared at him. And when he caught my eye, I did not take my eyes away. I made sure he knew I was staring because I was like, what are you doing? He took it over and he sat not far from us, and I watched him eat that as if it was the best thing he'd ever had. Like, he didn't separate it out on his plate. It was just like, well, it's all going to end up in the same place. Let's just do this.
I'm no stranger to weird food combinations. I grew up with uncles who poured the pot liquor or bean juice over their cake slices at dessert. It's just what they did. So
well, that's a deep Southern thing. That's the cornbread cakes,
right?
With that's not my thing. Like my grandpa, will put cornbread in a glass and pour buttermilk over it and act like he's just living his best life.
Listen, I'm talking these men would pour butterbean juice over, carrot cake. Like,
okay, but you know what? It's their own stuff. It's not on a buffet where everybody else is touching their bean juice.
It is kind of a buffet, family reunions. I just stepped in it. Family reunion food. Listen, we all know
which aunt's food not to eat.
Yeah, but it's not just family reunions, even like church potlucks or anything like that.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you a story about a church potluck. When I was a kid, we had church potlucks a lot. And I convinced the senior pastor's wife, and she thought that I was thinking this was a great idea. It was completely selfish. I told her that a lot of these women made amazing dishes. And what she should do is have them put their name and what the dish was called in front of it. So if people wanted the recipe, they could ask. My reasoning on that, there were several ladies in our church, that one lady in particular had like 30 cats and was not the cleanest lady. And I wanted to know what she brought because I'm not eating that food. And she's like, Amber, that is a great idea. And I said, well, then if they wanted to put recipe cards out or if they wanted to go and ask, and she was just like, Amber, that's so wonderful. She thought I was being thoughtful and generous. I was not. I was being super selfish.
So how did it work out?
It worked out great for me because I knew, and there were some people that, I mean, you had them Southern church mamas that they know how to cook. And they'd come up and say, hey, I want that recipe. But what was funny was the people that nobody wanted to eat their food because they saw how they lived. And it wasn't because they were poor. Do you understand? The best fried chicken I've ever had in my life was from a lady that didn't have two pennies to rub together.
Because they weren't conscientious.
Right. I mean, I've been in third world countries where they're clean and they live in dirt huts. Like, you can be dirt poor and be clean. Okay.
Right.
So it was more about that. But we always I'd go straight to the KFC bucket because.
Oh, no. I just went to whatever my mom had cooked because who are we kidding? I know when you do potlucks or family reunions, everybody's supposed to bring a dish or two, but my mama full on cooks for everybody.
Right.
And so like I would just eat what my mama cooked or what, select certain ones would bring. Is not a potluck or a family reunion just a great big old buffet.
It is. But still, it's your family. I would rather, because I love getting together with family and I love getting together with friends on big, like things like that. Phil comes from a huge family. And when they're all together, it's almost 100 people. That is a huge buffet. But you know what? I know these people and they've all been raised the same. Right. And even though you've got that one person that thinks that they are a good cook and they probably should stick to bringing the drinks, you know what they bring and their husband eats it and pretends like he likes it, but he doesn't. Like, we got two of those in the family like that. But everything else is genuinely really good. And they're good cooks. Phil comes from a family of really good cooks. But because they're family, I know. And you know what? The rule is parents make the kids' plates.
Well, I'm just throwing this.
I love that.
I'm just throwing this out there for a lot of my extended family. I don't trust y'all.
You don't trust your extended family?
My very extended family. Also, my extended family, because my parents were older when they had us, are older. So they're not cooking anymore.
I have family members that don't cook. They don't. They go to their favorite restaurant and order and bring it in. Now, there's been several times that we've gotten together as a family that we'll cater in Rudy's or whatever. Yeah. But I'm just telling you that it's the concept of the buffet. I just think it needs to be done away with.
I just cannot get the Quincy's in Bessemer, Alabama out of my mind. You want to hear a funny story that's sort of buffet adjacent?
Yes, I do.
Growing up in Alabama, there was this place called Battles Buffet. But I mean, it was a buffet, but, just a big restaurant, Southern style cooking, buffet style, lots of folks going through there. Well, my grandmother, who didn't drive, loved to eat there. And so my mom would take her to do her shopping sometimes. And she would want to go to Battles Buffet to eat lunch. So we would go and pick up my grandma and we would all pile into her car because it was this massive 4-door Gran Torino. It was blue and it was oxidized.
Of course it was.
And sometimes my cousin would go with her child who was born with a disability, but she incorporated him into his life. So this big Ford Gran Torino had 2 bench seats.
Yes, it does. They do. Yes.
And so you could sit 3 or 4 across the front seat.
And this was in a season when there was seatbelts were not enforced.
Right.
So people just piled in.
Kids didn't sit in baby seats, nothing like that.
No, they climbed up in the window.
So it would be my mom and the 3 of us kids and my grandmother, and then sometimes my great aunt, and then my cousin Carol and her baby Chris. There would be so many people in this car, and maybe a couple of other cousins in there. And my sister and I would lay in the back window, up over the back seat. We would lay in that window to go to Battles Buffet. So Those were the good old days.
I think the name Battles Buffet is so telling of a buffet. It's a fight. It's a fight for dignity that you've given up on. It's a fight for good, clean food that's not going to happen.
And the last corn muffin.
Now, the one thing that buffets typically have in common that are pretty good are the rolls.
Yes.
Those yeast rolls are they're standard. Pretty good. What about the mountain of butter that's just like...
Is that butter?
No, I don't know what it is.
Butter-ish? Or is that Crisco tinted yellow?
Probably.
I want to make a clear distinction. Let's not confuse a really good salad bar with a nasty buffet.
Exactly.
I'm talking about...
Yeah, I like a good salad bar.
What is that place over there on the water? Fogo de Chao?
Mm-hmm.
One of those places, one of these big Brazilian steakhouses has like this amazing salad bar.
Well, Texas de Brazil does too.
And they are
fantastic salad bars.
Well attended though.
They're they
have like a salad bar staff.
And they kind of, it's kind of like security staff. Like they don't play.
They do not play. Let's do not confuse those with buffets.
Yes.
Because I will tear into one of those.
Me too. I just think that, here's what I want to say. If you are listening to this and you are a lover of buffets, I want you to stop what you're doing right now. And I want you to go look in the mirror. And I want you to ask yourself, what am I living for? Do I believe that there's more to this life than, like, where are you at mentally in the moment where you decide to just, let's just go to the buffet? Like, what is it? And then stop and address that. And you can say, well, you have no right to judge me. You're right. I have no right to judge you. But I know in the moments of my life where we've had to go to buffets, it has been like, I don't know. I just think that we need to all do better at having self-respect in the way we handle ourselves at places like that. And like, I just won't go back.
Okay. Well, I'm going to join in with you on that and say that I'm going to one-up you here because that's what I do.
Okay.
Just kidding. I'm going to go ahead and, Brian, if you're listening, Brian, my husband, just, wipe off your debit card. If you are in Southeast Texas right now and you are about to go and eat at a buffet, call me. I will cook you a meal.
Oh.
And serve you at my table.
You know what? I would just lie to you and say I'm eating a buffet because your food's amazing. I would just say, Aimee, I was just driving down the road and I was about to pull into GC and you just so you'd cook for me. I'd do that in a New York minute.
Listen, I'm going to give you a pass on a cafeteria. Ain't nobody here hating on a Luby's.
No.
But if you feel like you must eat at a
old
buffet.
Luann plate.
That's right. I will set you up a little early bird special in my own kitchen if you just feel the need to serve your own plate.
I think that's hysterical. I'm not offering that.
So I'm going to be proactive on this.
Do it. I think that if you're wanting to go to a buffet because you don't have any other options, I'll give you all kinds of amazing options. If you're like, I want Southern hole in the wall, baby, I got you. I know where all those are at.
But Amber, the first step in getting help is admitting you have a problem. I'm a safe place.
Do you know, though, this is true. And I wouldn't wish any business to go under. Like, I don't. But since COVID, you know how many GCs I've seen in places like that have not opened back up? I think that is amazing.
How about this? If you are a manager or an owner or a frequent guest at any particular buffet, let me just say this. How about you take a step to prevent all the negativity that happens at your buffet? Put up some hand sanitizer stations. Why don't you encourage your guests to wash their hands? How about you do like over at Rudy's? They've got those hand sinks.
Yes.
Just out in the open.
Yes. What about also parents step up?
Yeah.
Be parents. The buffet is not the playground.
Or how about
you don't just let them run loose. You tell them, I'm going to take you. We're going to get your tray. You're going to keep your hands in your pockets and you're going to say, yes, I want that. No, I don't want that. And you make your kids plates. And until they're old enough to drive a vehicle, they should not be making their own plates at a buffet.
Or even offer a buffet guide for kids. Have somebody help your kids. I don't know.
But also, if you're going to go in public, if you want to lay around your house in a T-shirt with holes in it and no bra, like you do, if you want to lay around butt naked, that's up to you. This is your world. You do what you want to do.
But don't bring it to the buffet.
By all means, please don't. Be clean. Like, just be clean. That's just, have some self-respect, I think is the only thing, because you should have self-respect. There's not a person on this planet that doesn't have a purpose, that God doesn't have a plan for, that if you've got blood in your veins and oxygen in your lungs, God's not done with you. He can still do something. Stop giving up on yourself and don't let your give up be a buffet. Like, vote for me for president. No, I'm just kidding.
I agree.
Okay. I mean, come at me. I'll talk to you. I'm not going to change my opinion. You'll never be able to convince me otherwise.
Yeah, I'm still not going to the buffet.
No. I will. Here's a fun fact. If my options are the vending machine in a hospital lobby where you can get those little gross pre-made sandwiches or a buffet, guess what I'm picking?
I'm fasting.
Yeah, probably me too. I'll get the Snickers. I'll get a Snickers and a cup of coffee.
I would eat out of the vending machine all day long.
Absolutely. Because you know why? It's not touched by everybody.
Why is this making me think of those hot dog rollers at gas stations?
Okay, let me tell you something. Without throwing my husband under the bus, I'm going to throw him under the bus. He loves stopping at gas stations and eating gas station food. Now, there's a difference between gas station food and Buc-ee's. I think Buc-ee's they do good sandwiches and things like that.
Oh, that is not the same thing.
It's not.
No.
But Phil will throw down. He'll say, I'm just going to grab a hot dog. I'm like, why? I'm not against hot dogs. There's a couple gourmet hot dog places around here that are
hot dogs.
Oh, I love them. At the ballpark, we'd go watch a baseball game, go watch the Astros play, go watch when we lived in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, go watch the Rangers. I love getting a ballpark hot dog. I do. There's no shame for me. But a hot dog in a gas station is a different low. And my husband, I'm not saying I'm better than everybody. My husband will eat them. Could be his choice sometimes. And y'all, I'm a decent cook. It's not like he doesn't know what good food is.
I'm hung up here.
You can be hung up on Phil. I didn't do anything about it. I can't control
I'm not hung up on Phil. We started talking about hot dogs, and now I'm thinking about bologna.
Watch it.
Olive loaf.
Oh, no. What is that one that looks like slimy?
Potted meat.
Head cheese. Have you seen that? Have you been in the grocery store? I asked every time I'm in there and I see it, I ask when I'm in there getting our turkey and our ham, I'm like, do you actually sell this? And they do. I've never been in the deli at H-E-B or Kroger and seen anybody actually order it because I want to talk to that person. I want to know, what do you do with that? How do you slice that? It's gelled chunks of meat together in a loaf. And that is that's worse than a buffet. Head cheese.
It is like a meat buffet all crammed into one.
With Jell-O.
That's not even Jell-O.
It is. It is gelatin. It's the meat gelatin.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it's not Jell-O as in your mama mixed it up and put it in the refrigerator for you earlier. It's the collagen that has congealed from the animal fat.
Girl.
Okay.
I bet you that stuff rubbed on your face would make you
listen to me.
Lose wrinkles, though.
Close your eyes.
Okay, I'm closing my eyes.
Everybody listening, close your eyes.
Close your eyes. Bow your heads, close your eyes. No. Okay, my eyes are closed. What?
Ready?
Yes.
Potted meat.
I don't even know what that is.
Okay, next. You ready?
Yeah.
Head cheese.
I just think, okay, if you're listening and you don't know what it is, go next time you're in your grocery store. Don't get in your car and go there now. Gas is too expensive. But if next time you're in the grocery store, go over to the deli and ask them about it. And they'll show you if they have it. And they sell that mess. Okay. I've never met a human that eats it. And somebody does. They sell it all the time.
Okay, I'm going to give you one more. You
okay.
Ready? Deviled ham.
I've never had that either.
Like, what
now, I grew up on bologna, though. We ate bologna all the time as a kid.
I don't know that I've ever eaten bologna in my life.
Are you serious?
Not to my memory, and certainly not
Girl,
on purpose.
I tell you what, there is, and this is going to make me sound like I am talking out of both sides of my mouth, because I love a good steak. Creme brulee is my favorite dessert. I mean, I like good food.
Right.
But my childhood, there's memories, good memories of a good fried bologna sandwich. And I'm not going to lie, every now and then, it just sounds good. Like, you come off the lake, you're out in the lake skiing all day, and you come in for lunch, a fried bologna sandwich with Cheetos or with Doritos hits different.
Okay.
I'm just telling you, like, you can't criticize what you don't understand with that one.
I'm staring at you right now because my mind
You're
can't
judging
go
me.
there. No, I'm not judging you. I can't fathom it. Like, I can't get my mind around it.
Well, you know what we need to do is I need to get good boar's head bologna. I haven't bought it in years, but I'm go get a couple slices and I'm going to make you a fried bologna sandwich. Maybe the reason I love it is because so many of my childhood memories, like with my cousins and stuff, we ate that for lunch.
Yeah. So you want to hear about my childhood sandwich? It's the one I always go back to. It's comforting to me.
What is it?
It's a peanut butter and jelly, white bread with the crust, but it's been sitting in a cooler because I'm on a field trip and it's been squashed by my frozen Capri Sun. So it's really flat and it's cold.
Okay.
That's my sandwich.
Well, I like a PB&J.
But it's got to be cold and smushed.
And smushed. See, but that always feels, I don't know.
Feels wrong to you a little bit.
It does, a little bit.
Isn't it weird what brings us comfort?
Yeah.
Guess where you do not find those two sandwiches?
In a buffet.
On a buffet.
Oh, well, we went full circle with a lot of things. So I just challenge you, if buffets are your thing, question where are you giving up in life and what do you need to work on and how can we help you? Because we are here for it.
We are here for
help you.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, of course. I think we've got lots of fun things to talk about coming up.
Awesome.
Y'all stick with us and we'll see you next time.